Hello everyone, this is Jen and I make useful English Lit study videos on Shakespeare, poetry, fiction, literary devices and more to help you get top grades in the subject. So one of the major challenges that I find lots of students struggle with is essay writing for English literature. So you may know your texts inside out and memorize all of the key quotes under the sun, but if you're not able to express all of these in a cogent, sophisticated essay with depth, concision, and a unique point of view, then the bad news is that you're not going to get top grades. But the good news is that I am here to help. So in the rest of this video, I will be explaining why what you've been taught about essay structure could be misleading, what's the difference between a standard essay and a top grade essay, and show you sample paragraphs for a standard versus a top grade essay so that you have a clear idea of what to avoid and what to attempt going forward. So let's dive straight in. So chances are you've probably heard of the PEEL PEEL paragraph, which stands for Point, Evidence, Explanation, Link. And this is pretty much the standard formula for any decent lit essay. And if you're not familiar with it, here's the idea in a nutshell. First, we make a point about the theme and ideas we want to discuss in a given paragraph, which is usually expressed in what we call a topic sentence. Then we move on to bring in quotations from the text that's relevant to the theme in focus. Next, we explain how these quotations illustrate the theme, and in the case of lit essays, we would usually examine this by analysing the stylistic, syntactic, or structural techniques that's contained in these quotations. And finally, we will link all of this back to the main argument of the essay, which we should have already expressed in the thesis statement in the introduction. So most of the time, this PEEL formula does work, and it can be an effective essay structure for up to GCSE level. But for those of you who are looking to get beyond that average standard and into top grade territory, mastering the PEEL framework should actually only be viewed as a bare minimum, and we need to do much more before our essay can be considered top band work. So a key reason for why the PEEL framework isn't good enough is actually the flip side to why it's good. It's too formulaic and rigid, which takes away the room for stylistic flair and exploratory depth. Because when you think about it, deep ideas are often a result of some degree of meandering thought. A bit of back and forth, tug and pull is also the dynamic that characterizes genuine intellectual discussion. So it's the flexibility in engagement, organic movement between sentences, and cross-pollination of ideas that we're trying to strive at. So all the while, we should be able to maintain logical flow and structural integrity within the prescribed scope of an essay, which usually has to be constrained to a certain word limit. So all of this is what we're aiming for when it comes to the best type of essay writing. And I'll talk about how you can achieve all of this in just a minute. So now that we know the standard essay should always contain a thesis statement in the intro, topic sentences at the start of each section, and textual evidence to support our argument and ideas, here are 3 additional magic ingredients that we'll need to add to level up our essay, which I've summed up as the 3 C's: contextualization, criticism, creativity. By the way guys, I'd massively appreciate it if you could hit the thumbs up button below, subscribe to my channel, and switch on that bell notification if you find this video helpful so far. This would really help me carry on making these useful English Lit study videos so that you can get top grades in the subject and we can inspire more people to enjoy the study of literature. When it comes to contextualization, it's about how the topic that you're writing about was understood at the time when the text was composed. Take the characterization of female figures in Macbeth, for instance. We may take it for granted through 21st century lens that women and men have equal speaking rights, but back in Renaissance England, patriarchy was entrenched and its influence uncontested, which means that for Lady Macbeth and the Three Witches to take up such a significant portion of the play's lines, not to mention to yield such outsized power in the narrative, could in itself be a point that is worth exploring. But it's not enough to just place your argument in the wider historical context. You're also going to need to place it within the wider scholarship context, which is where secondary criticism comes in. The trap that I see a lot of students fall into, though, is that they'll just quote from a literary critic whose views validate their own points, when instead they should be looking for an alternative point of view that they can challenge and debate against. It's much more interesting to bring in a variety of voices and viewpoints, because this will in effect turn your essay into an intellectual discussion, which is, of course, top grade stuff. And it's going to elevate it above the bog standard sort of literature review type of writing that most of your peers are going to be settling for. And if you want a detailed illustration of how you can incorporate scholarship and criticism in your own essays, you can check out my video here, in which I introduce you to 3 top Shakespearean critics for the play Othello. Now, finally, there's creativity, which I think is the most important element of all. Creativity basically means looking at what's probably a topic, theme, or character that's been analysed to death from a fresh and unique perspective. And of course, what makes a perspective unique is your personal opinion on the text. Which I know sounds obvious, but most students don't even give themselves the chance to consider what they really think about a poem, play, or novel before they reach for the closest study guide or revision notes. Don't ever let teachers or even edutubers like myself tell you what a literary work is or isn't about. What we think is simply our view, but of course you have your own. And the study of literature would be much richer and more rewarding the more ideas and opinions are thrown into the critical landscape. So go ahead and throw your viewpoints in there. Now, one tip I have for coming up with fresh angles is to look at the content through perhaps a range of theoretical lenses. For example, there's heaps of Macbeth analysis out there, but not a lot of people would have read the play through, for example, an eco-critical angle, i.e. considering how the play embodies ideas relating to environmental activism. Or, for example, your peers may all be looking at Lady Macbeth as a feministic character, which is pretty standard by now. So how about adding to the standard reading by engaging with her characterization from a psychoanalytic standpoint? For example, by considering her as a challenge to the Jungian archetype of the Great Mother, which I'm going to go on to illustrate in a bit with my sample paragraphs. Now, of course, classic close reading will always be the bread and butter of the best kind of literary analysis. So a strong essay would use close reading as a foundation, i.e. analysing the effect of style, syntax, and structure that's provided in the text, but then make it more interesting and sophisticated by building upon the argument with a range of theoretical and critical engagement. Let's now take a look at 2 sample paragraphs taken from an essay on Lady Macbeth's characterization. Try and spot the differences between them and see if you can tell which one is the higher level, top grade version and why. So it should be quite clear that the second version is superior to the first, and it's not even necessarily because it's longer. So you'll notice that version 1 actually hits all of the criteria for PEEL. There's the point in the topic sentence about Lady Macbeth as a feministic character, the evidence in the unsex me here soliloquy and Great Glam's greeting quotations taken from Act 1, Scene 5, the explanation about how Lady Macbeth's shift in tone reflects her strategic and ambitious nature, and finally there's that link which ties this moment back to the main argument, which is that Lady Macbeth is a feministic character. Now this is all clear and logical, but what it's missing are those 3 magic C's, which we will need in order to elevate this good enough piece of writing to a top grade one. So let's now look at version 2 and see if we can find these 3 C's in there. So as you'll see, the topic sentence here presents a much more nuanced, multi-layered point. In addition to the point about Lady Macbeth as a proto-feministic character, it specifies that she challenges a core identity as culturally associated with women, i.e. the mother figure. The student then frames this idea within the historical context when Shakespeare had written the play, which is the transitional period between Elizabeth I and James I's rule circa 1603 to 1605. And the emasculating anxiety that the new male monarch would have felt after half a century of strong matriarchal rule. But the student doesn't get distracted by this historical background, and instead immediately ties it all back to the text by commenting on how men and women characters yield different forms of power in the play, men the political sort and women the psychological kind. And this is followed by the relevant quotations also taken from Act 1, Scene 5. For example, with the imperative, "Come to my women's breasts and take my milk for gore," in which that keyword milk is used as a lexical touch point for the student to recall another quotation which appears earlier in the same scene, which is "too full of the milk of human kindness," that criticism that Lady Macbeth has for her husband. So lastly, the student sets her interpretation of Lady Macbeth's rejection of motherhood against the theoretical paradigm of Jungian psychoanalysis, which demonstrates the creativity of associative interdisciplinary thinking and of course a high level of analytical finesse. And there you go, guys. Here are the 3 magic C's that we're going to need in a top grade English Lit essay: context, criticism, and creativity. So I hope this was helpful in terms of showing you how you can write a top grade essay. And if you need more fundamental essay writing help, then make sure that you check out my essay writing module in my free all-in-one English Lit Foundation course, link in the description box below. It's a super comprehensive lecture where I walk you through each step in the basic essay writing process. And I use examples from popular literary study texts to illustrate as well. So as always, if you found this video helpful, please make sure to hit the thumbs up button below and subscribe if you haven't already to show your support and encourage me to make more top grade lit study content for you and other top grade passionate students all around the world. And I will see you, as always, in the next one. Bye!